Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Adrian Tan Show, where I speak with folks to explore the nuances of modern work and its idiosyncrasies. As the world of work becomes more and more dynamic, upskilling the workforce becomes crucial, and employees realize this too. A Randstad study revealed that while only 43% of Singapore workers said they were committed to staying with their current employers, 91% said they were interested in learning and development opportunities in the workplace. Employees in tech roles in particular benefit greatly from upskilling and reskilling due to the complex and ever-changing nature of the tech industry and its capabilities. To speak with us more about this is Ryan Meyer. He has over 25 years of experience in the tech and educational sector, including almost a decade at General Assembly, and has built the company's enterprise presence in the APAC from ground up. General Assembly, or GA for short, has helped Fortune 100 companies, startup, and other businesses identify tech talents, develop their talent pipelines in future-proof areas such as coding, software engineering, UX design, and many others. Hello, Ryan. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Adrian. Nice to be here.
Where does this podcast find you?
It finds me in Byron Bay, Australia. I moved up here about a year ago from Sydney as we work predominantly remotely in the region. So I'm about, 8 hours north of Sydney by car.
Wow. That's amazingly far.
It is.
And what exactly does General Assembly do specifically? I know it's in the education space. How different is it from the many other educational companies that are out there?
Yeah, the best way to explain it is that General Assembly provides proven pathways to the modern economy. And that can be through the learning of new skills. It can be for individuals or employees of large organizations or citizens that are sponsored by their government. But we've been in operation since 2010. And the best way that I always come back to describing what we do is providing people an on-ramp to the modern economy jobs.
That's a nice way of putting it. So what are some of the examples of training programs or some of the careers that people get to jump straight into after General Assembly?
Sure. So we generally split things into two buckets. There are those that come to us to reskill, and that means to learn something new that they can then go and work in that field or that discipline. And then, loosely speaking, upskilling. And that's typically you're working, touching data at a large bank or large insurance company, and you want to get better, or you want to go from a data analyst, say, to a data scientist. But generally speaking, we operate in sort of modern economy disciplines such as digital marketing, user experience design, software engineering, data, and product. With now, I think we probably could say AI is its own and separate new category, although it does cross a lot of those existing disciplines.
It sounds like you guys are focusing very much on what most people would call the sexy careers out there. And I guess there's a huge reason behind it because it's definitely in huge demand.
It is. And I think education can be this great equalizer. Technology and tech, if you will, is already a certain type of equalizer. But if you're trying to get someone into a role where they can have an impact in a job, and we do that in typically 3 months through our immersive reskilling programs. You have to focus on one specific skill, and those skills, you could say sexy, but really they're in demand. So we try and always stay ahead of the curve as in towards what's in demand in the workforce and in demand for individuals.
Earlier on, you mentioned about reskilling and upskilling. A few weeks ago, I was at an event and someone was asking, how do we look at reskilling differently from upskilling? For a second there, I was dumbstruck. I do not know how to really answer that question. Could you break it down for the audience? Firstly, what's the
Sure.
difference and how should we approach it differently from the employer standpoint, assuming you are in a job, and also from the learner standpoint?
Um, it's pretty simple. Upskilling means you want to get a slightly higher salary in an existing role. Reskilling is you want to burn the house down and do something completely different. And so we can take someone with little to no coding or software engineering experience and get them job ready as a junior software engineer in 3 months. For upskilling, the path is usually lighter. It might take, it might be a 40-hour program over 10 weeks that someone does while they're working. And so in the back of their mind, they might be doing projects that will accelerate their trajectory at work, but not necessarily change the job family that they're in. But it's
I
really
see. And
semantics.
what?
I like to refer to everything as reskilling, but it is a bit semantic.
Yeah, it does sounds very similar in a way. So there are literally, from a learning perspective, there's literally not much of a difference. You are still ultimately acquiring something new. It's just whether it's adjacent or perhaps something entirely different altogether.
It's the objective. And some people might reskill very slowly over the course of a couple years into into a new career. But the way that we see it is, we want to create I guess the highest time for value spent. So if you come to us for 3 months, we know with a very high degree of certainty that you will be able to get a job in that discipline in the modern economy.
And something that I would also like to get your help to dispel, I have met across the course of my career, met up with hiring managers, recruiters, and I even have friends. I have a football buddy who went through such training program, a boot camp-ish kind of program where it's very intense and trying to acquire new skill set. But maybe it's more of a Singapore thing. There's always this comparison. Oh, 3 months and you manage to acquire that skill set, but in a university it will take 4 years. So how could I make sure that you actually are well schooled, well trained in that? What do you have to say to such
Yeah,
people?
so there are a couple ways to look at that. I like to flip that on the head, because I think traditionally, and I'm from, I guess, the old school, but traditionally there was an association of time with the value of your education. If you're getting a university degree, that's going to take typically 4 years, an advanced degree maybe another 2 to 3 years, and you're going to come out of that with the proper credential to have a beautiful career for the rest of your life, or at least that used to be the exchange. And what's happened over the past 20 to 25 years is that the world just started moving very quickly. And so,
Hmm.
all of those people that I graduated with that went to become diplomats or lawyers or bankers, those that are thriving now are the ones that have picked up new skills, or are able to do that very specific thing they study in a wide new context. So I think
Hmm.
this is, General Assembly occupies a very narrow niche. We are Our whole existence is predicated on getting someone up to speed and job ready in as short of amount of time as possible. Whereas universities, uh, there are other reasons to be there. People need to grow academically. They want to learn how to think, creatively, or
Hmm.
so we're not trying to teach those soft skills. We're not trying to necessarily create a well-rounded person. We want to put someone through the ringer and mimic sort of the pressure you go through in a startup, so that you come out and you're ready to continue learning, but to deploy the knowledge that you've gained. So as a result, we typically shy away from credentialing, um, and we focus more on projects, having people build projects while they're in the classroom. And so that when they graduate General Assembly, they have a portfolio of work. So when an employer says, "Oh, I see that you did a software engineering immersive at General Assembly. How do I know that
Hmm.
that you could be a software engineer at this company?" And that individual can show the work that they've done and explain the technical bars that they had to pass to submit that project, and really get into it. And I think that's a lot more powerful, as from the employer's standpoint, than someone who simply has a credential but may or may not have the actual chops to do the work.
It also seems like the educational system or the traditional education system has always functioned or imagined how education has been from a very earlier time where things doesn't move so fast. I remember this great quote from Professor Scott Galloway. In 10 years, things may not have happened, things may not have changed a lot, but 10 years can suddenly happen in 2 weeks. And I think we are seeing that, especially so when ChatGPT first come into the scene. Before we can get used to 3.5, 4 is out. Before we can get used to 4, so many other things are out there as well. Mid Journey, etc. So really trying to be a bit more nimble, a bit more agile, trying to go with the flow of the wave of the water may seem a much more practical means as we continue to see how people are being displaced in so many jobs nowadays.
Except if you have to explain to your parents that you're going to get a job out of a 3-month program. So, I think there are definitely generational divides. And, the university I went to in the States was founded in 1789. And that was a big, when I was going there, I thought, oh, this is amazing. That, the change, it's probably resisted change for hundreds of years in order to maintain its prominence. But after you get out of university, or if you decide not to go to university and you want to adapt skills, this is something, this is a conversation you'll be having for the rest of your life. And I think, to your point about ChatGPT, there's nothing better than taking ChatGPT and showing someone who's over the age of 70 what, opening them up to it. And because it blows their mind, it becomes very visceral and very real, where the world is changing. And I've heard it. I think in the Wall Street Journal this week, it was someone like an author likened it to the invention of the steam engine, or the steam power. People didn't exactly know how thermodynamics worked necessarily when it was invented, and that's the same with AI. A lot of the people, especially at OpenAI, are saying very specifically they don't know exactly how it works. But I think as we start to harness it and use it in our daily lives and understand it better, there will be a step change. It's really hard to project forward who the winners and losers will be. It does feel, I'm a bit of an older guy, so it does feel a lot like the early 2000s again, when people just started throwing crazy money at, any idea that was .com, pets.com, or, anything. So I think it'll take some time to change out. And, the French have this saying, the plus ça change, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I don't think it's going to completely, upend the way that people work or the jobs that are out there, but it will be a significant part of the conversation. And if you take that through, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, if you take that through to education, this is all of a sudden a magic genie that you have in your pocket or in your laptop. And apparently the usage numbers of ChatGPT went way down when school and university broke for the summer in the Northern Hemisphere. So there are a lot of students using it to write papers, or, to maybe do some critical thinking exercises that they should be doing themselves. But I sort of see it as, again, I remember when I first started using a TI-85 calculator, a graphing calculator in the classroom, and everyone said that, this is going to ruin children. They won't know how to do proper maths. But it's just a tool. And if you look at it like a tool, even though it's seemingly magic, it will get incorporated into ways of working, and there will be some really awesome opportunities in the next, I think, 5 years or decade. How those will shake out, I'm a little bit, I'm scratching my head. But with regards to education, and I think this, I'm happy to make this prediction, because I think in 10 years, when I look at this interview, hopefully this holds true. But the whole notion of asynchronous learning, I think it was pretty much a poor value proposition beforehand. There are people that can go to a massive online open course or a MOOC and get something out of it, and push themselves, and be self-motivated. But the whole notion of asynchronous learning, I think, it changes quite dramatically. The notion that you're going to serve up videos and people are going to watch 40 hours of videos to learn how to code, or when they can have a genie in their phone or in their laptop that's going to have a two-way conversation with them. I think that changes. I think that changes a lot dramatically. So there are a lot of companies that have invested quite a bit into, quote unquote, asynchronous learning platforms. And I don't know that those will be in any way attractive in the future. But that's my, that's my idea.
I personally have taken quite a number of MOOCs. They are incredibly efficient, at least the way they're being positioned, but I seldom get to complete any of those programs because after a while, there's just no motivation. It's like trying to get you to do a workout at home versus in the
Yes.
gym where you have the peer support, sometimes the peer pressure. But you will still do it. You may even push yourself to lift heavier, to run faster, but it's all because of the environment. And to your earlier point, I remember a running joke that we should really take care of our health nowadays, because for all you know, your future doctor may have passed his or her exam with ChatGPT.
That's a very good point. And I think in the future, people probably will be self-diagnosing. I mean, they already do with Google, but I tell my children that traditionally, I think every parent tells their kids you should be a lawyer or a doctor, and that's a safe career. I tell my kids you do not want to be a lawyer, you do not want to be a doctor, because it's hard to predict how these new technologies are going to how those are going to play out. And maybe everyone then has a doctor in their pocket, or maybe you're wearing a device and it kicks off so much data that a computer or an algorithm can tell you what your next health scare, or what your next health challenge may be. I think there's that gets me excited. The amount for you know crunching data that heretofore was difficult to crunch at scale. Now maybe that becomes a foundation model for a health app or health AI app. I mean, there are just there's so many applications, and I think people are running in every different direction. But the good thing is we've as we've tried to ingest the changes at General Assembly, we've been very careful with with how we deploy this. So we've taken modules on AI, and especially generative AI, because we've been teaching machine learning for the last 5 years in the context of data science, and so that's a certain type of AI, a certain type of automation, obviously. But as you look at generative AI, we've developed modules for generative AI in sort of every discipline that we offer. And then we've gone and recently released a 2-day generative AI workshop for professionals, for working professionals. So this is for our sort of our core enterprise clients that want to start thinking about this and want to start investing in this, but really teaching people how to fish first, because we don't come to a company and say, this is how you should deploy generative AI. It's it's a consultative conversation. We can say, this is what good prompt engineering might look like up to a point, but the company has to decide how are we going to mask this data internally? How are we going to leverage this? Will this allow us to sort of combine and draw analysis across two large data sets that we couldn't previously reach across? So there are a lot of really interesting use cases, and especially a lot coming from Singapore and coming from the region. There are a lot of companies that are quite large and structural to their domestic economies, and have access to enormous amounts of data that heretofore they haven't really known how to how to leverage. And so it's exciting times.
It definitely sounds so. I'd like to turn the spotlight back onto you and to understand a bit about how you actually got into the educational space and how it eventually led to General Assembly.
Sure, I appreciate that. I've always prefaced every conversation I have with that these opinions are my own and not representative of General Assembly. I like to be able to speak candidly, but both of my parents are teachers. I actually had my father in high school, and he would try and deploy surprise quizzes or whatnot, and I was always a very good traditional student. And after university, I had a few jobs consulting this, that, and worked at a large Japanese manufacturing firm. And I was so bored. And I remember thinking, like, this is it. I'm not going to make it. I can't do this same thing for the rest of my life. And so probably around
What exactly was
2007,
the boring part, and what was your expectation before jumping in?
it was just a very hierarchical environment. Again, it was a company that was started by a samurai and had been around for 150 years, and so and I was working out of the U.S. but for a Japanese company, and it was extremely hierarchical. And there are American companies that are extremely hierarchical as well, but the notion of starting something up was always looming large in my mind, and so I kind of rearranged my life and, around 2010 to help my mother start an education company that's focused on, there's a company called Minds in Motion, and it's focused on physiological development of children. So most development for kids is seen through the cognitive lens. And what we've developed and we've done a few scientific studies that are peer reviewed showing the benefits of putting kids through physiological exercises and building up their sort of physiological systems uh, in addition to support those cognitive systems. And there's a lot of emergent research on the benefit of doing that. And so that was my mom's passion. I thought, okay, this is, I like starting up companies, so I'll help her get that off the ground. And that company persists to this day. There are probably 80,000 kids in the US that do minds and motion exercises in their public school classrooms across 10 or 15 states every day. And so it's not, it's not one of these things that's become like this huge runaway success, but it really works. And it requires teachers to participate and the benefits when you apply it to a whole school are quite good. And so that kind of brought me back towards education. And then I started an investment company for early stage ideas coming out of research universities in the US. And that was a total flop. It was one of these things. I had no business doing it, but I had a lot of energy. I thought, okay, well, this is definitely the way of the future. This is how someone might invest in the next Facebook, and built a platform and went through a lot of emotions and ultimately self-funded it for a lot longer than I should have. And as that was winding down, General Assembly I was just starting up, and so I met with someone in what we call Silicon Beach in California, Los Angeles area, Santa Monica area. Someone who is sort of on the ground with General Assembly. And they said, "Hey, we're looking for someone to run our operations here." And so I grabbed that opportunity, and that was 2000. So it's been almost a
Mhm.
decade with General Assembly, and so I've seen us grow, and then came over to this area of the world in 2016 to run and grow our Asia Pacific operations. And so now we have, as you probably know, we have a campus in Singapore. We have operations in Australia. We have a campus in Kuala Lumpur through a partner, Academy GA. We have a partner in Thailand, and so we have a campus in Bangkok through the True Digital Academy. And earlier this year, we officially announced and commenced our operations in Japan through a partnership there with the Mori Building Group. They make the sort of the most futuristic looking skyscrapers in Tokyo. So we've been able to grow at almost a clip of sort of one country a year for the last 3 or 4 years, even through the pandemic. And so that's very much on my mind is where do we go next, and how do we bring our sort of our type of education
Mm.
into into a new environment in a new country where we might not know that much about. So we're always looking for stellar local partners.
Mm. I would really like to understand across your days in General Assembly, since you started with them so many years ago, how has it evolved to cater to the changing needs of learners? Because this is something that many people would have against the traditional universities or schools. They never change their curriculum. It's so hard to even get them to even change maybe the color of the textbook, let alone the content. Uh, but we were talking about how things are much more dynamic, how fast things are changing. I'm very certain the way training were conducted when you first joined would be very different right now. How do you account for all that? How does the school actually adapt those changes and make sure those are the right changes to implement to begin with?
Sure, that's a great question. The sort of our North Star metric is typically the outcomes rates for individuals that go through our consumer facing campus system. How quickly does that individual get a job in that discipline, and at what rate? And we publish these every year. And pre-pandemic, we were always above sort of 9 of individuals who graduate our programs getting a job within 180 days. It's dropped down a bit since the pandemic, and since a lot of the instruction has gone remote, but we're, in the high 80%. So now, so it's not, it hasn't fallen off a cliff. It's just, we've always internally wanted it to be above 90%. And so that's really keeps us year over year very honest with the curriculum that we teach. Also, we draw upon a tremendous number of really highly highly trained, highly or just super smart rather instructor practitioners who might come and teach one or two or three courses with us and then might leave their mark on some aspect of the curriculum. We're always trying to take those suggestions and help evolve the curriculum because we want to keep that job number as high as possible. And that sort of plays out in terms of word of mouth. If someone comes to General Assembly and they give their hard-earned money and 3 months of their time to us, and they don't get a job out of it, the world's going to hear about it, and their friends are going to hear about it, and so one of our biggest drivers of growth has always been word of mouth. Even for those individuals coming for an upskilling course where it might just help them secure a promotion, or their company is running something at scale, and it helps them, advance their career within a company sponsored event or a sponsored course. It really comes down to word of mouth and that ever popular net promoter score. So we try and harness as much data from the classroom to see that we're on track, that we're offering the best instructor practitioners. And that's another, I think, important point of differentiation. When you sort of think about traditional education and the experience you'll have at General Assembly, all of our instructors are what we call instructor practitioners. They're individuals that have done or are doing the work in the real world, and they're coming to the classroom to sort of demonstrate that work and to help train people so that they can do that work. But they're not, it's not coming from a theoretical place. And again, if you're trying to teach someone a new skill in a short period of time, that seems to be the best way to go about it. It's also persisted since the time of Aristotle for over 2 millennia, where for the things that not how to do, you learn by doing. So I think it's it works and it can work remotely. I'm a big fan of in person, and
Mm.
to what you mentioned earlier about if it's working out or if it's studying or if it's, just paying attention, if you're with a cohort of like-minded individuals who are, invested in learning something new, it raises the bar. And that's kind of an important point, I think, that sometimes gets left behind. But it's powerful. And according to our data, 25 people is the optimum number of people to have in a classroom. So we have over 100,000 graduates from our programs, and we've done lots of analysis. And based on the number of people that, for whatever reason, the highest value for time spent or the highest net promoter scores come when you have not 24, not 26, but 25 people. And I think it's because it allows people to kind of break off into groups, but there are enough people that you can, you pay attention. But that's our magic number. So we kind of build everything around a 25-person classroom.
So how many students right now are on remote learning versus how many of them are actually doing it in person?
Now with General Assembly, I'd say we're 80% remote and 20% in person. As we, as we navigated the pandemic, we were really good about moving all of our operations entirely remote within, a week. And that seemed to work. And so we, and the world has changed. Consumer tastes have changed. People, don't necessarily want to come into a school 5 days a week. So even for the in-person courses that we still run, they're typically hybrid. They might be 3 days on site and 2 days remote, or vice versa. But there will always be some in-person time. But yeah, we've really sort of jumped over into a remote first environment.
I'd like to next get your take on picking the right training program or the right course. In Singapore specifically, I'm sure you may have heard of some aspect of Skills Future.
Mhm.
And that is where a government program and there is a Skills Future credit where any adult, I think above 25 years old, would be able to get a sum of money that you can spend on training programs. And there are like tens, hundreds of thousands of different programs to look at. But having said that, the last time the stats were released, the adoption rate is still relatively low. And based on my conversation with people who hasn't really exhausted their Skills Future credit, it's because they don't even know where to begin. Because there's just so many to pick from, right? And you only have that small amount of money. From a course selection perspective, what would you advise your people who may be looking to take something? How would you advise your cousin if he
Yeah.
or she may be a bit lost? I'm not really sure which one to take. Should I go AI? Should I go data? Should they just look at the trend, or are there?
Well, I think there's a bit to unpack there. First of all, the Skills Future credit is, I think, $500 Singaporean. And you can use that on there's a whole catalog of courses you can take. Um, None of which are going to get you a new job. That's just too little money, too short of time. Most of the courses, and I think we have some in there, some short form courses, but really in that scenario, you want to, I hate to use this expression, you want to kiss as many frogs as possible and see which one turns into the prince or princess. But you want to do something that you're passionate about, because I think, obviously you can make cold calculations about where you think the world's going and what you need to be studying. But at the end of the day, if you're not doing something that you feel innately good at or innately passionate about, you're probably not going to be as happy or as productive as you could be. So that's a great way for Singaporeans to choose from a broad variety of things and maybe do 2 or 3 small courses and just get a sense for, oh, I think this is something I could go much deeper on. Um, in Singapore, we've had this, I call it probably the most successful government supported education program in the world. That's been with the IMDA, the Infocom Media Development Authority. It's part of the Tech Immersion and Placement Program, whereby the IMDA pays a portion, I think 65 to 90% of the tuition for a 3-month immersive course. But the way that it's structured is that it's success based. So it's based only on successful graduation and on successful job placement. So it keeps everyone tied together, and it's probably the most elegant design for a government program in that it aligns the needs of the individual with the needs of the government, with the needs of the educator, like General Assembly. And so that has been running for now over 7 years in Singapore, and we've always had an above 90% total rate of putting people into jobs in the discipline that they studied within 180 days. So it's been tremendously successful. And every time I sit down with someone from the Australian government or someone from the Thai government and explain this, or the Filipino government, and explain how how good this works, how much value it creates for everyone involved. There's no real leakage of you can't rort that system because it's based on results. And it always gets, I should say, the government always kind of takes it and like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Now let's take it to committee and turn this horse into a camel. And so you end up with something that, well, maybe they want to hit, a broader swath of people. And, we're always trying to be as sensitive with governments as possible, because sometimes the goal is to just try and give 10,000 people sort of a small leg up, rather than taking 1,000 people and putting them into new jobs. But my position, and personally, I believe that as a government, you're much better off moving people into modern economy jobs, because for every one person you move into a new career, and that career is going to, give that person stability over a long period of time. They're going to have increased salary and earning capabilities as they progress. That then the second and third order effects of that are, a magnitude larger of individuals touched. So in my mind, that's always the best use of government money. And we can show a government how the tax, you'll basically pay for this program in terms of, increased tax base over the next couple of years. Um, but the conversations with governments are always interesting, and we're always full of ideas, but we come to every conversation sort of through that, through the lens of what we're doing in Singapore, because it's so elegant, it's so simple, and it works so well.
And my next question is really on the way younger learners learn. I've read a report somewhere that because of how the current generation are being exposed to things like Netflix, TikTok, and all that, you have shorter attention span and they expect entertainment out of everything. You wouldn't exactly call learning a course, whether it's 3 months or 4-year degree, entertaining in any way. I know it's a bit too much to ask for a school to entirely Netflix the curriculum, but are there changes that any school has to make in order to cater to a better learning experience for the younger learners?
That's, that's an interesting question. I think the attention span of everyone has deteriorated. And maybe it's most pronounced with, with the younger generation. But, I remember writing papers in university and watching interviews on TV when I was younger, and the questions would be long form. And then this is one of the things I love about the podcast format is you can actually have a longer form conversation rather than trying to jam everything into a soundbite. Um, but to answer your original question, we don't really manipulate things to try and make them easier to consume. What we try and do on the other end of it is to get people more motivated, and to make it as interactive as possible so that someone is learning something by doing it. And so that kind of takes a bit out of the, it takes a bit out of the wind out of those sails, because if someone is, week over week doing a new project and they're scrambling to learn something and deploy it, or, um, you know, integrate a database or an API into a software engineering project, they're really kind of, the instructors are helping them, but they're trying to complete this project as they're learning it. And so I think that works very well across generations. Um, because if you take a very passive approach and it's sort of, we're going to provide edutainment, and all you have to do is sit there and consume this, this media slash education that we, presented for you, you're not going to get a good outcome. And it kind of goes back to why I'm very skeptical about a lot of the asynchronous learning platforms and asynchronous learning, again, in my opinion. But it does feel like it works for a very small number of people who are extremely self motivated and disciplined. And a lot of people will start something but not finish it because it's very passive. And so, it's one of the things I worry about with the younger generation, my kids that are 8, 10 years old, is that I want them to be builders of technology, not just consumers of technology. And most kids right now are consumers of technology. It's like, I want an iPad because it's going to give me a game to consume or a video to consume. But I think it's imperative on all of us to teach the next generation how to build things with technology and how to learn about what's happening behind the scenes of that wonderful device that you just want to watch Netflix for kids on.
We spoke earlier on about how AI is like the .com in 2000, where it's really changing how many companies function and how many people approach the way they work. I've also read a lot of studies about how traditional schools, especially, they're very fearful of AI. As we mentioned earlier on, you have people using ChatGPT to write essay and all that. But having said that, it is still generally a good enabler across different industries, across different functions. Is AI something that GA is also using internally to make itself more efficient, to scale the way training is being conducted, or maybe to improve your curriculum?
We're not using it yet to improve curriculum because I think it comes back to it's an idea generator, but you don't know if those ideas are going to be even correct or not. So it really forces, we're encouraging everyone to use it to, especially grant writing, these things that are so boring and don't really necessarily aren't value creation exercises. We'll use it for that, where you have to tick a box. And sometimes if you want some marketing ideas, or you want, it's a great way to just to kind of bounce give me some ideas, or take this text that I've written and make it thinner, or make it more impactful. So everyone's playing with it. I think you see the limitations, I think, quite quickly. And you also, you still have to edit everything. So we're all becoming kind of editors in a sense. And I can imagine I can imagine a future where schools will, for the sort of critical reasoning tasks and the exams, might force people to go back to pen and paper, so that you can use ChatGPT all you want to write your papers, edit them, whatever. But when it comes down to it, and you have to, end of the semester, end of the term, for your final grade, you have to come up with an idea and articulate it and support it. I think that might go back to pen and paper, or to air gapped computers that you can't, they can't access it, because I think it makes those core skills of humans so much more valuable, because everyone can now be a mid-level or a mediocre professor. I can write papers that make you sound fantastic, but so hopefully it makes people more terse, and helps them get to the
Mm.
point more quickly. That's
I
my
can imagine
optimistic take.
I can imagine someone out there already working on a prototype of infusing ChatGPT into a pen.
I can imagine. Yes, I know. So
The
maybe there's
next
no way.
Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah, maybe there's no way back. I don't know, but it
And,
is.
and
I
last
think.
question before I let you
Oh,
go.
sorry. Sure.
How do you see the future of learning as we look at how things have evolved over the past few years, especially over the past 2 years? Where do you see learning in 5 to 10 years' time?
Wow, that's a big question. I, I I don't think it will change as much as people think that it will. I think the notion of truth will become much more important, because as what I was saying earlier, the foundational models for some of the large AI and generative AI services don't always spit out a correct answer. It might sound correct, but it might be factually incorrect. So being able to parse through arguments, and parse through large sets of written data, and come up with your own idea about, is that actually truthful, or did that, was that well reasoned? I think that'll be much more important. But those are things that universities have been teaching for a long
Mm,
time. I do think there's a misalignment, and this is predominantly, I think, more prevalent in the United States than it is in this region. But there's a misalignment between value and education. So, it used to be that you would go and you get a 4-year degree, and then that degree would confer some status on you, and you'd be able to work in, whatever it was that you studied for the rest of your life. That's obviously changed, but there are a lot of universities that are still selling very expensive degrees that really just saddle people
mm,
with debt, but don't necessarily prepare them for the future. So there's talk of a student debt bubble in the US, and it's been there, for quite some times, and it keeps getting larger. But the cost of education, especially at the university level, has outpaced inflation wildly for the last 30 years. And so
mm,
you get people that are maybe, feel like they have to go to university in order to get a career. And universities are telling them, yes, you have to come here. But if it's a mid-tier university, and you're not that motivated of a student, you're probably better off saving that 30 grand a year or 40 grand a year that it's going to cost you, and putting that towards something else, or saving it, because you have a lot of individuals that are saddled with debt, and they had the promise of a career, and they don't really,
mm,
that's not necessarily materialized. The flip side of that, however, is that you do want people to study what they're interested in. It's not that you shouldn't necessarily go to university and say, I'm going to study the one thing that gives me the the best chance for economic freedom down the road, you won't be happy. So there needs to be a balance. And I think it comes back to teaching, critical thinking skills. If someone, whatever it is they study, if they have a base level of critical thinking, that's going to carry through to, to all of these different modern economy disciplines. But it's interesting. I'm just happy to have this front row seat to see how things change. But over the next, over the next decade, I think you'll see an increased importance in education, but the providers might become more narrow, and there's so much data out there that the ones that aren't producing quality, aren't producing quality educations will probably be called out. And then if you think about the whole wide world of work and what it means to be an employee or to be an employer, there's a it's now almost incumbent upon the employer to create opportunities for individuals to increase their skills and to grow within the company. And I think to date, a lot of that has sort of sat in the realm of HR or learning and development. And it's been a very sort of past approach. Sort of like we should be doing L&D or learning and development. We should be, spending X amount on, on each employee. But it's been approached as though, how do we create an employee benefit from this, rather than sort of something that's a bit more elegant to say, how do we create an employer or a company benefit from this thing that we need people to learn, but and get people, because it's going to create the employee benefit anyway, but get people motivated and push them into the things that we, the skills that we need as a company. So the merging of, I think, education and competitive advantage, and this is sort of how we start the conversation with most of our large enterprise clients, is how do we weaponize education to make you, to improve the bottom line, or to make the company more competitive, and all those other things that typically are the first things you talk about. Those just are attendant benefits of using education in this way. And the universities, especially in the US, that have sort of blurred the lines between, between the private sector and the sort of public education sector, are those that are, the places that everyone wants to go to, your Stanfords, your MITs, your Caltech. And so I think there's a real opportunity, especially for companies to use this as a way to get the workforce that they want, and attract the best and brightest people, because they know that if someone comes to work for, whomever corp, that they can, maybe they start as a data analyst, but there's a pathway for them to become a data scientist, or, a pathway for them to become a software engineer. That's the direction they want to go. And I think that's probably one of the most important trends we've seen amongst people starting their careers. They want to be able to grow, because the younger generation might not know that, things are changing so quickly. They might not know that they want to do, this thing in digital marketing for the rest of their career. But if they go somewhere and there are pathways to learn and to grow, I think that's really attractive.
And I think importantly, the best and brightest may not necessarily just come from Ivy League. I had a conversation with a people analytic leader, and he was telling me he was working back in Venezuela for Pepsi Cola, I think. And he basically applied some analysis and to figure out, actually, our best salespeople did not come from top university. Those that came from second-tier university, or so-called second-tier university, are in fact outperforming those from Ivy League. So that means if we were to double down on getting people from the second-tier university, we may have a better outcome in sales. And actually that happened. So I think for companies out there, there's also there need to be this understanding and this realization that even education is evolving. The needs of the market is evolving. And the economy also evolving equally fast. And with all this coming to you at breakneck speed, you just can't depend on someone to go through the snail pace 4 years program or from a traditional university, only to have them obsolete on the day of their onboarding.
That's a really elegant point to make. It's we always look for grit and determination. So it doesn't matter where, even if you didn't go to university, if you have those things, outside of the data science discipline, you can you can be successful. Data science requires a bit of a background in statistics and a certain type of mind. But for software engineering, for user experience design, these are all very achievable careers, and we want to demystify that so that people don't feel like they have to have a certain type of background or a certain type of credential in order to be to get that job in the modern economy. And I've seen it so many times personally. When we first moved to Australia, we hired someone who's a sort of a newly graduated student to be a nanny for our kids. And I made the mistake of inviting the team over to my house for a barbecue. And some of our admissions folks started talking to our nanny. And within 2 weeks, she had resigned and was taking a user experience design immersive, and is now a senior designer at the largest e-commerce platform in Australia, and is and has a solid career. And so it comes from it doesn't necessarily matter what the background is, as long as the grit and determination are there. And a lot of companies are sitting on tens of thousands of employees, and without an idea as to how to find the hidden talent. And so if you think about our sort of traditional consumer business, we're trying to admit people that we know will have a high level of success. And as the 100,000 people have gone through that system, we've gotten really good at identifying markers of success. Again, all kind of falls into grit and determination. But when we apply that same approach to a population of 10,000 or 20,000 employees, you can start to can start to find a lot of hidden talent. And so it makes a lot of sense. The evolution of that story you were telling about PepsiCo in Venezuela would be, how do we identify the existing employees we have to bring those people, to get them to raise their hand and move forward into new roles? And I think that's where you can create a lot of economic benefit for large organizations.
Determination, and also I think to make sure that you're happiest taking up that training program, not just following whatever trend that is out there. And with that, Ryan, thank you so much for coming onto the show. I really enjoyed this conversation with you. For companies and potential learners who may be keen to learn more about yourself as well as General Assembly, where do you suggest they begin?
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. I really appreciate the conversation. It's a really simple website, www.ga.co. That'll take you to wherever you need to go. And we're always happy to have conversations. But it's a wild world out there, and there are a lot of things that are on the horizon. And I appreciate this conversation. So thank you. It's been very thought-provoking.
Thank you.